CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello and welcome to The World Today, live from CGTN in London. I'm Stephen Cole. Our top stories. Vote counting has started in 5 Indian states, despite the country hitting a record number of coronavirus deaths within the past 24 hours. Israel's day of mourning. Tributes are paid to the 45 people crushed to death at a Jewish religious festival. And the Australian kangaroo industry gets a bit jumpy about a possible ban on exports to America. But first, India has recorded its highest daily COVID-19 death toll since the pandemic began, just a day after it became the first country to hit 400,000 new cases. Almost 3,500 people have died in the past 24 hours as the country battles a devastating second wave. Hospitals are struggling to cope with a severe shortage of oxygen and beds, and many states have warned of a lack of vaccines too. Several regions have imposed restrictions as calls grow for the federal government to order a national lockdown. Well, the chief executive of India's Serum Institute, the world's biggest vaccine manufacturer, is warning that jab shortages could last until at least July. Every adult in India is now eligible for the vaccine, but many states say they have none to offer. Shweta Bajaj has more from New Delhi on the government's response to the health crisis.
Fortunately, we haven't heard much from the government as far as why this has gone so out of control. On the 1st of March, India was standing at about little over 100,000 active cases. It was also a time when everybody has started to let their guards down. This was also the time when the second batch of vaccination started, which was 1st of March. Suddenly, the cases from 12th of April have not just ballooned, they have really gone to a level where it's uncontrollable at this point. You know, all hospital beds in India's capital are full. There are no oxygen cylinders available. You can forget about getting an oxygen bed. Everything has become a struggle as far as your health infrastructure is concerned. But between this time, we saw a religious gathering called the Kumbh Mela, which happened in the north of India. We also saw election campaigning happened in West Bengal. Incidentally, the results of that elections have just come out today, and during the results of the elections, ruling party BJP hasn't won there, and Mamata Banerjee, who's the current chief minister of the state of West Bengal, has won. But of course, large gatherings like election rallies and such kind of religious gatherings that happen at the Kumbh Mela are partly to be blamed, but really literally every household, every neighbor has full families who has COVID, and the spread hasn't stopped yet.
Shweta mentioned 5 Indian states are releasing election results from polls held in March and April, when the second wave was starting to take hold in the country. Despite the daily surge in cases, some supporters in West Bengal have taken to the streets to celebrate their party's win over the ruling BJP. The results are considered a test of support for the Prime Minister, Narendra Modi's, and his handling of the pandemic. Critics say mass political rallies added to the severity of India's second wave. Israel has observed a national day of mourning for the 45 people, including children, crushed to death at a crowded religious festival. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has promised a full investigation into one of the country's worst ever peacetime disasters. Stephanie Freed reports.
Flags lowered to half-mast outside government buildings. Parents, siblings, friends, and community members burying their loved ones. The Mount Meron catastrophe is weighing heavily on the hearts and minds of Israel's citizens. Information revealed around decisions made in the lead-up to this year's gathering and warnings issued more than a decade ago about site safety indicate lacking uniform policy and possible negligence.
45 people ultimately died because religious leaders decided there won't be limitations on numbers of people at Mount Meron. It's terrible.
Governance over the pilgrimage destination, characterized as extraterritorial, is unclear. Ultra-Orthodox groups, the Religious Affairs Ministry, police and local authorities share responsibility for overseeing Mount Meron, but no single state body bears full accountability for what is Israel's second most visited Jewish holy site. Within hours of Thursday night's deadly crush, blaming directed at the various responsibility-sharing bodies began. An accusatory finger is also pointing in Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's direction. Critics accuse the Prime Minister of capitulating to ultra-Orthodox coalition partner demands in return for personal gain as he faces criminal charges.
These are unreasonable demands that any reasonable Prime Minister would not give in to. Any other Prime Minister might be politically dependent on the ultra-Orthodox parties, but not for his survival.
As Israel mourns, there's growing demand for an official investigation into the Mount Meron tragedy. According to local reports, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is expected to oppose the formation of a commission of inquiry. Stephanie Fried, CGTN, Jerusalem.
Let's take a brief look now at some other stories from around the world making headlines. An investigation has started after gasoline tankers burst into flames in the Afghan capital, Kabul, killing at least 7 people and injuring more than a dozen others. It also sparked large fires that caused power cuts to parts of the city. 2 security sources say they believe it was caused by a Taliban rocket fired into the area, but the Taliban denies that. The Democratic People's Republic of Korea has accused US President Biden of pursuing a hostile policy, warning the US could find itself in a grave situation. In his first speech to Congress, Mr. Biden described Pyongyang's nuclear program as a serious threat to global security, a move which North Korea has called a big blunder. At least 7 people have been killed in Myanmar after security forces opened fire on protesters rallying against military rule. It's been 3 months since the army took over, with hundreds of people killed and thousands detained, including democracy leader Aung San Suu Kyi. Demonstrations on Sunday were coordinated with other Myanmar communities around the world. Crowds have returned to Spain's largest bullfighting ring for the first time since the beginning of the pandemic. The charity bullfight at Madrid's Las Ventas will raise money for the matadors left jobless by COVID-19. Rahul Pathak is there and joins me now live. Rahul, this is part of a number of events that have allowed the public to attend. So is Spain slowly opening up now?
Yes, Stephen, very slowly. Remember the nationwide state of alarm, so that's the law that allows the various regional governments to impose things like limiting social gatherings, imposing perimeter closures, curfews, things like that. That is coming to an end on May the 9th. And we've already had some big events with crowds. You may remember we had that music concert in Barcelona last month, the Love of Lesbian concert. 5,000 fans attended that, no social distancing. Everyone had to wear a mask and pass a COVID test on the day of the gig. Now, 3 weeks since that concert took place, just a handful of the people who attended have contracted COVID-19. So the organisers there are hailing that as a huge success. Madrid, out of all the regions, has got barely got any lockdown restrictions whatsoever. Very, very relaxed. They hosted a big tourism expo, so hospitality expo, at the EFEMA Convention Centre last month. EFEMA, you may remember, was used as an emergency field hospital during the height of the pandemic. Well, last month it held that expo with more than 9,000 people attending that over a period of 3 days. So signs that Spain, and Madrid especially, is opening up again.
Indeed, Rahul, it sounds as though it's becoming more relaxed. The massive FITUR Expo is taking place also, isn't it, this month?
Yeah.
Is it too early? Are people saying it's too early to start allowing large public gatherings and events like this, or not? What's the feeling across the country?
Well, in the last 2 days, I've been to 2 very different kind of events. We went to the International Labour Day event yesterday, very pro-socialist event in Madrid, and today we've got the bullfighting, which is people tend to be on the right of centre of politics that follow bullfighting here. Both have said they want to get things moving again. They want to attend events again. So I think there's a lot of fatigue around lockdowns and restrictions. You mentioned that Fitur Travel Expo. Normally 250,000 people attend that over a period of 5 days, also held at Ephema. This year, because of COVID, around 10,000 people will attend. And I think a combination of lockdown fatigue, more people being vaccinated, of course, a need to kickstart the economy, that has seen attitudes from all people, all political spectrums, gravitate towards wanting things to get back to normal. So having events like Fitur, the bullfighting here tonight, and of course Euro 2020 coming up in June, the football tournament, Sevilla hosting 4 games, 18,000 people will be allowed in the stadium to watch those matches. So fingers crossed, a feeling here that Spain, things are getting back to normal post-pandemic.
Let's hope so. Rahul Pathak in Madrid. Thanks, Rahul. After 3 years' work, the renovation at Versailles in France is complete, a task that took over 100 workers and hundreds of tons of scaffolding. The renovation focused on the roof of the Royal Chapel, as well as the chapel's gold platting, a sight the visitors haven't been able to see for 200 years, according to the project manager, Stéphane Mazzi. Altogether, the project required over 800 tons of scaffolding, which by itself took 6 months to construct and around 150 craftsmen to build. Find out more at europe.cgtn.com. Well, to say it's been an unpredictable 12 months for the global economy would be a massive understatement. We've had epic recessions, strong recoveries, and in some cases a big dip in productivity for the 3rd time. So how do you start a business amid all that uncertainty? Well, some entrepreneurs have managed it, and with real success too, as CGTN's Guy Henderson reports from London.
When Lucy Halley packed in her corporate fashion job to start her own business, no one could have known a pandemic was coming. Lucy decided to press on anyway, and now EO is a reality.
Our material's made from recycled fishing nets, like ocean waste and landfill waste.
In fact, it turned out to be rather an opportune moment to launch a sustainable sportswear brand.
I've been warned by a lot of people, don't start a business right now, but actually so many amazing businesses started when, you know, everything was going wrong. Generally, people are switched on now to working out. A lot of people have been feeling really lonely, but actually taking a lot of comfort in online workout classes and building communities through working out.
Meanwhile, lockdowns have shown Ashley Lings the importance of appreciating the simple things in life.
Mindfulness doesn't have to just be meditation. It can be anything as simple as going for a cycle, doing a jigsaw puzzle, or even having a coffee.
So he's launched a range of mindfulness products for adults. Jigsaws and colouring books as a way to calm the mind, switch off and ease some of that anxiety.
People have found themselves with more time at home, but if anything, that actually makes it a little bit more difficult to actually sort of separate work from home life. So we're all about trying to help people take some time for themselves, so really providing activities for people to do just to sort of slow down, relax and actually find something that helps them put their phone down.
What those who've started businesses during all this mayhem don't know yet, though, is what could happen next.
There's been a real focus on physical and mental health during the pandemic. And that is something that both Ashley's and Lucy's businesses have tried to tap into. Britain is now emerging from lockdowns, of course, hopefully for good. And so both of them will be hoping that some of those shifts in consumer attitudes that we've seen through the course of the past year or so can remain permanently. Guy Henderson, CGTN, London.
Still to come here on The World Today. As the US considers banning imports of kangaroo products, we look at the potential impact for Australia's economy.
More than 100,000 people in Italy have now died from COVID-19.
The vaccination programme offers some hope for the future, but intensive care units are near capacity.
The Spanish government is hoping to vaccinate over 1 million people by next month.
Living in Germany are struggling with their mental health.
Hungary is supplementing the EU's vaccine rollout, buying doses from Russia and China to speed up the process.
4 million people have tested positive in France.
After a grim winter, the promise of a spring bloom that could mean freedom for millions.
Welcome back. A reminder of our top stories. Election results are being released in 5 Indian states as the country records its highest number of coronavirus deaths in the past 24 hours. Israel is observing a national day of mourning for the 45 people crushed to death at a Jewish religious festival. UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson is facing more allegations of undeclared donations and loans to fund his lifestyle. Mr. Johnson is already being investigated by the Electoral Commission over the spending for his flat refurbishment. And all of that comes as the elections are due to take place across the UK on Thursday. Our correspondent Andrew Wilson reports.
It's early days, but there are multiple potential threats to Westminster and Boris Johnson's domination of UK politics taking root all over the country. Ahead of Thursday's Scottish elections, a new pro-independence party is unlikely to dent Nicola Sturgeon's SNP, but it is making the issue an even bigger deal for public discussion.
We've got a history of hundreds and hundreds of years in the United Kingdom, and I love living in Scotland, but I like the best of both, and I want to stay in the UK, and I think it's the most sensible thing to do.
Despite the pandemic outbreak in India, people were still allowed to fly into London from India until yesterday. And from London, they're allowed to come to Scotland. And it's just outrageous not having the normal controls that independent countries have.
Westminster, however, is concerned with other matters, mostly Boris Johnson's refurbishment of his home in Downing Street. There are questions over who paid the bill of over $60,000, and now a national discussion about his spending habits, his personal trainer, his son's nanny, and allegations he complains about his $200,000 a year salary.
Sorry, I mean, of course, but you know, this is. I don't think, with great respect, Sam, I don't think that this is the number one issue for the people of our country. Indeed, by several orders of magnitude. Several orders of magnitude.
Unfortunately for the Prime Minister, the media and his enemies disagree. It's also English local elections on Thursday, so the Labour leader's out campaigning. The issue of the flat, all the ammunition he needs to claim the Prime Minister's letting his people down.
They're worried about the front line of the NHS, which has done so much during this pandemic, and they're very worried that crime is going through the roof, conviction rates are falling, and we've got a Prime Minister who spends his time looking at wallpaper.
For now, the polls suggest the public is less concerned about the Prime Minister's finances and integrity than the newspapers. But those issues of Scotland and Northern Ireland and political trust are real and likely to remain a potential threat, if not now, then later on. Andrew Wilson, CGTN.
Let's take a brief look at some of the other stories we're following this hour. In England, Manchester United's Premier League match against rival Liverpool has been delayed after thousands of fans protested against the club's owners. About 200 people invaded the Old Trafford Stadium and then stormed the pitch. The Glazier family have been in control of the club since 2005 and played a key part in the failed European Super League breakaway attempt. Spanish police have intercepted a gang trying to smuggle 7 tons of hash into the country. It's one of the largest drug finds this year. The alleged smugglers were detained after police patrols stopped a boat off the southern coast loaded with 200 packets of hashish. Spanish, Dutch and French police have been investigating the gang since March 2020. China's tech giant Baidu has rolled out its driverless taxis, becoming the country's first paid autonomous vehicle service. Although the rides are driverless, there's a safety staff member sitting in the passenger seat in case anything goes wrong. Every journey costs $4, and the taxis pick up and drop passengers off at 8 stops in Beijing's Xiaojiang Park. Indonesia's government is looking to introduce new long-term visas for foreigners in a bid to boost the tourism industry, which has been hit hard by the pandemic. Business owners, entrepreneurs and investors are being targeted to make the island their second home. CGTN Selkina Azawalia reports from Jakarta.
Alison Thackeray has moved around a lot in her life, but one place remains special, the Indonesian island of Bali. For decades, Alison has spent the majority of her life working across the globe. But as the pandemic hit, she chose to settle and relax in Bali.
And I was really shocked by what I saw here. Really, really shocked. Because every time when I visited Bali before, it's thriving, it's living, it's pulsating, it's full of visitors and tourists and life. And when I came back this time, the streets are just dead.
More than 50% of Bali's economy relies on tourism. In 2020, Bali recorded an 83% decline in the number of tourists visiting the island. To revive Indonesia's billion-dollar tourism industry, the government is working on a long-term visa that will allow foreigners to live and work for up to 5 years.
Bila orang asing datang ke Indonesia,
when foreigners come to Bali, they benefit the economy in many ways. They rent a home, they contribute to restaurants and benefit many other sectors as well. We hope this visa that is still in planning can allow foreigners to make Bali their second home and contribute more to local economy.
Indonesia's tourism ministry say its main target are business owners and visitors who are willing to stay in Bali for more than 1 year. The concept is to create a second home visa for those who can invest at least $140,000 in businesses or the property market.
I feel like that the government is sort of in one way maybe trying to capture those global nomads, but have perhaps missed a step in terms of if there is this requirement of a large-scale financial investment, that will not fit the needs of the global nomads who are basically going to be looking more for a cheaper place to stay and a cheaper way to stay.
Aside from Bali, 2 other Indonesian islands, Batam and Bintan, are also on board. If the plan goes ahead, the 5-year visa could be introduced as early as mid-2021. Sulkina Aluwalia, CGTN, Jakarta.
The US is considering a bill to ban the import of kangaroo products, including leather. And that represents a multi-million-dollar threat to Australia's commercial kangaroo industry, which supporters say plays vital economic and ecological roles. Greg Navarro explains.
Not far from the centre of the rural Queensland town of Surat, just down the road from the post office and the pharmacy, you'll find the area's biggest employer. Around 20 people work at the Waru Game Meats, where hundreds of kangaroos are processed each day. The meat is trimmed, packaged, and sent off to wholesalers.
The company also pays about 140 commercial shooters who kill kangaroos on mostly private lands, farms like this, each week.
Without the plant, this town of about 400 people would struggle to survive.
It could mean the chemist closes, one of the food store closes, the high school could close. It would have a major impact on the town, yes.
Australia is home to around 43 million kangaroos. Experts say changing the landscape for agriculture and the lack of predators has contributed to rising numbers and increased impacts.
If, as an example, kangaroo numbers are really high and they start consuming, overgrazing too much vegetation, that removes cover on the ground, which means, as an example, that if you're a small mammal or a reptile, you've lost your home, you've potentially lost your source of food, you may be more vulnerable to predators.
Australia has allowed the commercial harvesting of kangaroos for nearly 40 years to help manage populations. Today, the tightly regulated industry is worth about $155 million US.
Export's a very important part of our industry because we have a limited, as a small country, we have a limited amount of use for it. We consume a lot of the meat, of course, that is harvested, but the skins, which are a byproduct of that meat industry and the harvest, are then exported for leather.
About a third of what's produced here ends up in the U.S., where lawmakers are currently considering a bill to ban the import of kangaroo products. Animal rights groups behind the bill have created a campaign called Kangaroos Are Not Shoes, featuring graphic images and a claim that 2 million kangaroos are slaughtered every year. Australia's government has reportedly invited U.S. officials behind the bill to see firsthand how tightly controlled the industry really is.
I mean, no one likes to be accused of doing something criminal or horrible when they're not. We're an industry. We're proud of our product.
Experts say Australia would still need to cull kangaroo populations even without a commercial industry.
And if you are just to then go and shoot them but not make use of that resource, that's fairly questionable in a world where, people are eating meat.
Any hit to the industry would be felt the most where kangaroos are harvested, in communities where economic survival is so dependent on the industry's success. Greg Navarro, CGTN, Surat.
The top story again, India has recorded its highest daily COVID-19 death toll since the pandemic began, just a day after it became the first country to hit 400,000 new cases. Almost 3,500 people have died in the past 24 hours as the country battles a devastating second wave. Up next, it's Razor, CGTN Europe's flagship science and technology show. This week, can we eradicate COVID-19, or is it here to stay? Plus, a revolution in resolution. A technique for imaging biological molecules has recently broken records. It allows people to see the individual atoms that make up proteins for the first time. That's Razor After the World today at 16:30 GMT here on CGTN. And finally, SpaceX and NASA's Crew 1 mission has ended successfully as 4 astronauts safely returned to Earth, splashing down off the coast of Florida. The crew spent 167 days in space, a record length of time, and landed just after 3 a.m. local, making it the first nighttime landing since 1968, when NASA's Apollo 8 returned from the moon. The spaceship circled the globe until it lined up with Florida before firing its thruster to drop out of orbit and deploy parachutes to touch down in the water. Incredible accuracy. And that's it for the world today. Thanks for watching. We're available on smart TV apps such as Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire and Android TV. You can also find us on YouTube and Dailymotion, as well, of course, as CGTN.com and on the CGTN app. From all the team in London and me, Stephen Cole, it's goodbye.